Okay, I'm going to talk to you all about adding inlay to your metal, and that is that red colored material that is inside the metal there. We're going to add that to this heart piece right here. So without the inlay, that's what the heart looks like. There is a small shape that was cut out. It could be any kind of shape of the top layer. And when you solder it to the bottom, it leaves this indentation or this small cavity to hold the inlay. So these are the colors of inlay that we have. A lot of different colors. Any color that you choose. And this right here is the epoxy that we're going to use. The epoxy is a two-part resin. One part hardener, which is that right there, part B, and one part resin. You have to mix equal parts of that together, and what it will do is through the chemical reaction of mixing those together, it'll create a hard plastic, which is what that is in the center there. And we add the color to that. And that's what will be in this piece here in just a moment. So what we do is we take and we add a little bit of the resin, small dab, and a small dab of the hardener. Now there's a slight color variation to the two, just so you know which one you're putting down. But if I were not to add any color to this, it would dry completely clear. Now, we also need to pick our color. I'm going to pick blue. This blue is a nice vibrant blue, so I put a little bit of that paint right down there. Now I'm ready to mix. So I'm going to take a small piece of wire, scrap wire, and I'm going to mix the epoxy together completely and thoroughly for at least 30 seconds. I'm going to mix it up very, very well. Mix the entire batch of epoxy together. Do not just mix parts of it together. Make sure you're mixing it all together. So I mix this up until I get it completely mixed. Now I'm going to add the color. I add just a little bit at a time. I don't want to add too much color because it could clump up the epoxy, make it almost too thick to work with. What I want to do is I want to mix enough color that the epoxy turns opaque. Opaque means you cannot see through it. Transparent means you can see through it. Translucent means light will pass through it. We don't want either of those. We want to make sure that it is completely opaque. That way, if there are any kind of imperfections inside the shape there, we won't see it. So now that that's all mixed up, I'm going to now carefully add it to my shape. So I pick little bits of it at a time, making sure it's not dripping, and I dab it into the shape. Take a little bit more up, making sure it's not dripping, and drop it in place. The idea of this is to get this entire shape filled with the color. Once I get most of it in there, I'm going to move it up to the edge and allow it to stick to the edge and then level out. I want to be careful not to get any of this on the surface. If you get any on the surface, You basically leave it there and try to crack it off later. If you try to wipe it and smear it, it'll get all over the surface. And I'm carefully moving it up against the edge. I don't want to overfill it because I don't want it to be convex, which means it's kind of bumped up or bubbled over, and I don't want it to be concave. I don't want it to be sunken in there. And now at this point, that is completely finished. So I've got that inside that shape. You can see it's nice and level with that top surface. Now at this point I need to let this dry for 24 hours and then it'll dry into a hardened plastic, and that's our inlay.